right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, this is episode 104 of Inner Demons. So let me get straight to it. I told you guys I was going to start putting out more episodes of Inner Demons. I want to at least try to shoot for 2 a week. So this is the second one. But anyways, like I said in my last episode, I'm just now starting to get back into this series of Inner Demons. So bear with me if I'm all over the place. So anyways, in the last episode of Inner Demons, I touched on a number of different things. I touched on my addiction, my relationship with my stepfather, how my addiction impacted my relationship with him, and how he ended up being diagnosed with cancer. One of the things that I didn't talk about that I realized after I put that episode out is how cancer ended up taking him. And it did. After he was diagnosed with cancer, I told you guys that I went back to his house a couple days later after his girl had called me and she told me that he was in bad condition again. So I went back over there, took him to the hospital, and that's when they diagnosed him, as having stage 4 cancer. From there, it was just downhill. Cancer has always been one of my phobias. It's always been something that I've been deathly scared of. Aside from flying. You guys can laugh all you want. I don't like airplanes. I'll get in them, but I don't like them. I had seen several family members in the past die of cancer. It's a grueling death. Cancer's unforgiving. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, how healthy you are, it just creeps up on you and it takes you. And that's what it did with my stepfather. Obviously, he lived an alternative lifestyle using, being an addict all his life. From years and years of drug abuse, it obviously has an effect on your body. Like I said, the last thing anybody that's out there strung out on the street is thinking about is going to the dentist, getting their teeth cleaned, or going to the doctor when, you have a medical issue. I've seen a lot of people on the streets when I used to run around down there on 16th and Mission where they had serious medical issues. You could look at them and see that they had medical issues, but it wasn't a priority. This wasn't nothing that they were concerned about because, when you go to the doctors, obviously if they admit you, you're going to be sick. Unless you have dope that you can take into the hospital with you, you're going to be sick. And a lot of the times when you're strung out, you don't want to kick, or you don't want to go through that. So they put their medical issues on the back burner. Anyways, I told you guys that, the couple times that I had seen my stepfather, I could just look at him and tell that there was something physically wrong with him. He was, underweight. He was a lot thinner than I had ever seen him before. And, that's why I'd asked him. I was like, hey, Pops, he's like, is everything cool? Are you healthy? You taking care of yourself? Are you at least, got a doctor that you're going to every now and then, at least to, get your blood checked and make sure that everything is cool. And, he swore up and down that he had contracted, and I believe I talked about this in the last episode, that he got food poisoning. But again, food poisoning, it gets you down for 2 or 3 days. You got the runs and you can't keep nothing down. And, you're right there on the shitter, face and ass. And it's coming out of both ends. But after a couple days, you're good. This was something that was continuous. It was a continual thing for him. This wasn't just a one-time thing. He had told me over the weeks that I was in contact with him that he was having stomach problems. So I knew that something was going on with him. Anyways, I talked a lot about all this, so I don't want to go back into the same things that I had already talked to you guys about. But, after the last time that I had went to his apartment and, I tried to reconnect with him in the way that I told you guys about. And, again, it's sad that I felt that this was the only way that I could connect with him, to go back to that time when I was a youngster and we used to sit around, shooting dope. And, that's the only way that I knew how to connect with him, to take me back to that time that I remember when I was a kid. Luckily, it didn't happen. I was strong enough to overcome that. The temptation almost had me. I mean, like I said in the last episode, I was literally a minute away from rolling up my sleeve and just, putting that shit in my muscle. But I didn't do it. Anyways, after that visit, obviously I went back home. I spent a couple hours with him and I went back home. And by then he was already on hospice. They had already dropped the bed off and, they had moved his living room around, and that's where he had his hospital bed. It was a big ass bed, and So he was right there in the living room. Anyways, I want to say it was like 2 days later. And keep in mind, this all happened within a 2-week span. From the first day that his girl called me and told me that she was like, Junior, there's something wrong with your stepfather. You know, I can't get him to go to the hospital. It was like a 2-week span that all this happened. Cancer takes you quick. When, you know, if you're lucky enough to catch it at its early stages, sometimes you can do something about it. They have treatment, chemo, and other things. That's another grueling process. I don't even know if I would do that. But there's things that you can do to get rid of it. When it's allowed to metastasize in your body and it gets to a point where it spreads everywhere like it did with my stepfather, it was all in his stomach, all throughout his major organs, then it's to a point then where there's nothing that they can do but try to make you as comfortable as they can possibly make you, and let you live out your last few days. And basically they gave him about a good 2 or 3 weeks. I want to say they gave him about a good 2 or 3 weeks to live. And I was conscious of that. I was gonna go see him every couple of days, every other day. But I want to say it was like 2 days had went by, and his girl called me out of nowhere, and she's like, Junior, she's like, I think your stepfather's gone. And I was like, what do you mean you think he's gone? I mean, either he's gone or he's not gone. I mean, what do you mean? What's he doing? And she just told me that she couldn't get him to move, and that, it was a long night that night. He had stayed up all night and he was in pain, he was suffering. So I don't know. I don't want to say nothing negative about her. I respect her, but just the way that everything had went down, I kind of felt like she really wasn't helping the situation. She did nothing to help him. It was like she depended on me to do everything. And I was all the way out there in Dublin. I mean, it's not that far from Oakland, but she was right there with him, and she couldn't get him, get in the car and just take him to the hospital or call an ambulance. It was like she didn't know what to do. Anyways, I tell her, look, I'll be there in about 20 minutes. Just give me about 20 minutes and I'll be there. So I get there, and when I get there, I pull up because I don't know if he passed away or I don't know what kind of condition he's in. But I tell her to come outside, because if he did pass away, I didn't want to see him like that. I wanted to remember him the way that I remembered him. And even though, the last couple of days or the last couple of visits that I had seen him, he didn't look all that great. I wanted to at least try to keep the memories that I had of him when I was younger, when he looked normal, because cancer, it had ravaged his body. He was seriously underweight. I mean, he just looked bad. And for those of you that have had family members that have passed away from cancer, you guys know what I'm talking about. They go through a process that, it's heartbreaking to see somebody that you care about go through that, because there's nothing that you can do for them. All you can try to do is make them feel comfortable, and sometimes that's not even enough. So she came out, and I'm like, what's going on? And she basically told me that he had passed away. And there was somebody else there that was present at that time, and I had her go in there and look, and she came back out and she said, he's gone. So again, it was heartbreaking. This was somebody that raised me from the time I was a kid, and now he was gone. It hits different. Him and my mom, I consider them both my parents, but my mom, that was my blood mother, and that was somebody that had been with me my entire life. And for those of you that have mothers and fathers that are still alive, man, value it. If you guys got issues with them, put that shit aside, because once they're gone, you're gonna regret it. I'm telling you, you're gonna regret those bad feelings, or the whatever's going on between you guys that are stopping you from communicating. You're gonna regret it later. Death is something that you can't come back from. Once they're gone, they're gone. I would do anything to bring my mother or stepfather back, even if it was just for a day. But that's not possible. So for those of you that are lucky enough, fortunate enough to still have parents in your lives, man, value that. Hold on to it. Embrace it while you got it. Because again, when it's gone, it's gone. It's gone forever. So anyways, I waited there for the ambulance to come. I didn't know what the process was. I don't know if any of you have ever been through it, but it was crazy because they didn't come and get his body until hours later. The paramedics came and they basically said, look, there's a process, but the process doesn't include us taking him. That's somebody else's job, so there's nothing for us to do. So they ended up leaving. I obviously wasn't going to stay there with his body in the house. It's just, there's something morbid about that. But I stayed there for a little bit, and I did what I could to comfort his girl, because she took it hard. Again, like I said, it just came up out of nowhere and took him that fast. Eventually later on that day, they came in and got him, and we had his funeral a couple days later, or it was like a week later or something like that. And he chose to be buried. My mom, she wanted to be cremated, so there was a funeral for him, and that was basically it. After I lost my stepfather, that was pretty much all the immediate family that I had that had passed away. I still got a couple of aunts from my father's side, and there's still some family left. It's scattered, and we don't have contact as much as I would like. I'm in contact with my kids, but as far as like the rest of my family, the communication is not there, and we don't have a relationship like that. We're not a tight-knit family the way that I would like it to be. And after what my mom's side of the family did after she passed away, I don't want nothing to do with them. It's sad that a lot of families got to experience the ugliness that comes with somebody passing, but a lot of the times we'll have family that will never come around. They'll never come around on the holidays. They'll never come around for social reasons. They'll never come around just to do a welfare check to see how you're doing. But when somebody passes away, like a matriarch, a grandmother, my mom, or somebody that, was like a centerpiece of the family, when they pass, all of a sudden, here comes the leeches. Here comes the leeches, and, these people that have never really been there, but now they want to come around because they know that there's money involved, that there's a will, or the house is going to be sold or something like that. And that's the only reason why they come around. They show their true colors. It's sad, but that's an ugly part of death that I think a lot of families experience. And my family's no different. I experienced mine. Unfortunately for me, I was locked up in the Santa Clara County Jail when my mom passed away. And my stepfather was out there, but they treated him like an outcast. They wouldn't allow him into my grandmother's house, and everything that my mom owned, if they didn't want it, they basically threw it away, and they didn't allow us to keep nothing. And basically anything that they didn't want to keep themselves because it wasn't of value, monetary value, they threw it away. A lot of that stuff that was thrown away, it was sentimental to me, but it was just trampled on. It was packed in garbage bags, and it was thrown away. So, I don't want nothing to do with that part of my family. Anyways, that should wrap up that part of Inner Demons. My stepfather, again, when he passed away, that was the last piece of my immediate family. My mom had passed away, right before that. Vicky passed away. My grandmother ended up passing away, and these were really the only people, immediate people. My mom, my stepfather, my grandmother, that was like the extent of my family right there. So everybody was gone. So although it hit me a little different when my stepfather passed, the thing that came with that is knowing that this was the last piece of my immediate family that was left, and everybody was gone. And it just made me more conscious of the fact that life was passing me by. I was getting older, and it just seemed like it was a few years ago when I was 18 and all my family was around, but now everybody's gone. So anyways, I just wanted to close that part up on that last episode of Inner Demons, because I didn't speak about how my stepfather had passed. I just got up to the point where, I told you guys I was trying to connect with them, and then, after that, I kind of left, or I ended the episode right there. But, obviously cancer did end up taking them a couple days later. Anyways, in closing that part of it, I just want to say this. For those of you that have the unfortunate experience of watching somebody that you care about, pass from cancer, my heart and my prayers are with you guys. It's a grueling process, and it's tough, man. It's not like they go easy. There's a lot of suffering that's involved with cancer, especially when it's all throughout your body and there's nothing that they can do. It eats you up. Anyways, what was a trip was right after I put that episode out, I was on my channel and I seen an episode of Hood Stocks that came into my feed. And it just so happened to be like right after I uploaded that video that there was an episode on Hood Stocks about an individual named Jap. I forget where he was from, but you know, he was from down south. He was from Southern California. And apparently he was with Tarzan when Tarzan passed away. And I watched that episode. But, you know, I tuned into that episode and I watched it because Tarzan was somebody that I've never really tuned in and watched the full episode of Hood Stocks. But I watched this episode, obviously, because Tarzan is somebody that I have a distant connection with because we were both part of the same organization, and because he's somebody that I've obviously talked about before in some of my stories. But shout out to that guy Jab, because obviously he was a Sureño from down south. He was from Southern California. I forget what neighborhood he was from, but you know, he was a Sureño, and he didn't know that Tarzan was an NF leader. He didn't know about his history. He didn't know nothing about him. He assumed that because Tarzan had identified himself as being from Pomona 12th Street, that he was a Sureño. You don't have guys from Southern California that are part of the NF anymore. That was the 70s and some of the 80s. You just don't see that anymore, so nobody is gonna make that connection. There's very few individuals left that are from Southern California that are still active within the organization. Pinky's one from Cucamonga, and then you got DC from Chino, and Tarzan was another one. So when this guy Jap ends up meeting Tarzan in this medical facility, I believe they were in Springfield, Missouri. That's a medical facility, kind of like how Vacaville is for the state in California. I think Springfield, Missouri is like a medical facility for people that are in bad shape that are doing federal time. Don't quote me on that, but if I remember right, I think Springfield, Missouri has a facility out there. Anyways, I think that's where Jap met Tarzan. And even if he did make that connection, at that time, both of these guys were there because they were in bad shape. I don't remember exactly what Jap said was wrong with them, but you know, he said that they opened him up and he had a zipper on his stomach. I mean, they basically opened him up, did some kind of surgery on him. So he was in bad shape as well. But Tarzan was dying. He'd been diagnosed as cancer. And I remember him saying something like there was a third floor where they put you, that's kind of like a ICU, an intensive care unit, and then there's a fourth floor that's like intensive care when you're in real bad shape or when you're dying or when they put you on hospice. That's where they move you to. So he goes on to talk about his interaction with Tarzan and how they spent a lot of time just reading books. And you know, they were broken wings. They were in a medical facility trying to recuperate. And I don't know if Tarzan knew, you know, that he was dying, and if he really knew how dire his medical situation was. But you know, from everything that I remember Jap was saying, Tarzan was of the mindset that, you know, I'm not gonna let this take me and I'm gonna still keep fighting. And you know, maybe he thought he was gonna come up out of that. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how long Jap said that it took for Tarzan to get to the point where he was in bad shape. I want to say it was just a matter of a couple of days. And like I said, with regards to my stepfather, it happens quick, man. When they diagnose you, or they find it in your body and they tell you that you're, you know, stage 4, it's all bad. So one of the things that I related to that Jap was talking about is that, you know, he said one night he was laying there in bed, he was asleep, and he heard like something scratching, and he was like, "Fuck is that?" And he looked around, I guess he was on the top bunk, or he was somewhere where he could see Tarzan, and he looked over at him and he seen that Tarzan was trying to scribble out a medical paper. He was trying to sign his name, and he was saying that, you know, the pen wouldn't work. It was broke. It didn't have no ink. So he's sitting there trying to sign this medical slip, and at some point Jap realized that he was trying to sign the medical slip with a pair of scissors. And I related to that because that's what happened to my stepfather. He started to lose his mentals. When I gave him my phone number and he grabbed a piece of paper and he put it up to his ear like he was talking on the phone, that right there told me that he was already starting to hallucinate. He was already losing his mentals, and he was on a downward spiral at that point. And again, this was just like within an hour after all those doctors had came into the room and had told me that he had stage 4 cancer. So that's how fast it took him. A couple of days before that, he was fine. I was able to have a conversation with him, and none of this stuff had happened. It all had happened within hours, within days. So, Jap had even said that when he realized that Tarzan was trying to sign that medical slip with a pair of scissors, that he knew he was hallucinating and that he was in bad shape. And Jap did what any good cellmate or anybody with any integrity would have done. It doesn't matter if he was norteño, sureño, Mexican mafia, nuestra familia. Jap seen that Tarzan was dying. And this wasn't on the battlefield. These guys weren't at war. Even if he did know where he was from, I believe just based on Jap's character, what I seen on Hoodstock, he probably would have done the same thing. So, Jap, he's like, hey brother, let me help you. Let me sign that for you, and I'll make sure that when the nurse comes by, she gets it. Because I believe Jap said that night that Tarzan was throwing up blood and, he was shitting blood. He was in bad shape. You got blood coming out of both ends. That's all bad. So when the nurse finally came by to pick those slips up, Jap was on the door and he kind of told her, he's like, hey, this is what's going on with him. He's been shitting and throwing up blood all night. And he went to sign this medical slip with a pair of scissors. So I believe he's hallucinating. So the nurse, she came back about 10 minutes later and they drew Tarzan's blood. And he said about 10 minutes after that, they came in there and they took him out. They took him out. They took him up to the 4th floor or whatever floor they take you to when you're dying. And that's where they, put you in hospice. And I think he said that same night that Tarzan ended up passing away. But again, shout out to Jap for, doing what he did, because, he showed a lot of character. He's a stand-up type of individual. From what I seen on Hoodstocks, this dude, even after he found out this guy was an NF member, this was somebody that could have been a potential enemy out there, on the main lines, he still had nothing bad to say about Tarzan. He was like, yeah, I got nothing bad to say about him. He was a good dude. And I think he even said that Tarzan had come back at one point, not in the flesh, but in spirit. And kind of like, he said that the curtain moved or something, and, he knew it was Tarzan basically coming to say goodbye. I'm not religious and I'm not into a lot of superstition, but I believe stuff like that. I believe things like that do happen. And Jap seemed like a credible individual and he believed it. So, shout out to him, man. And if you guys haven't seen that episode, I encourage you to go check it out, because, Tarzan, again, for those of you that follow NF history, this was somebody that was considered to be a legend within that organization. And he was somebody that had been a part of that organization probably for the longest. And I believe he was the oldest NF member that was active and still alive. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Inner Demons. If you guys liked this episode, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like this episode, give it a thumbs down. But either way, drop a comment and let me know what you think. As always, I just want to thank those of you who continue to show your unwavering support for this channel and who continue to tap in. With that said, you guys enjoy your week and keep pushing that positivity. Until the next one, this is your boy B, and I'm gone.